More than 25 years ago, a single mother of three was gunned down in a violent convenience store robbery.
And it didn't take long for police to identify their main suspect, and even less time for a jury to find him guilty. His sentence, death.
Now, new facts put that verdict into question. Political reporter Max Reese investigated every angle of this case, and he found more twists and turns than a Hollywood screenplay. Tonight, he reveals the secrets we found in Sylacauga. It's a WSFA 12 News special in-depth investigation.
25 years ago, inside the Talladega County Judicial Building, then District Attorney Robert Rumsey described an open and shut case to the jury that happened in November 1987, just a short walk from downtown Sylacauga, Alabama's best-kept secret. It was a robbery that went wrong at a well-traveled convenience store at an intersection known as the Forks. That led to the shooting death of the store's clerk, Linda Offord, a single mom. No money was taken from the cash register. The killer was identified as Billy Keunzel, a high school dropout who worked at a textile mill in nearby Goodwater. The day-and-a-half-long trial led to his guilty conviction. Jurors were so convinced he pulled the trigger that they deliberated for just an hour and came back with the decision to sentence him to death. Since 1988, he's never received so much as a new hearing. All of his claims have been denied mainly on procedural grounds by both federal and state courts. Now, 26 years later, the story isn't as open and shut as originally thought.
To say it's a very thin case is an exaggeration. There's no case.
Meet Robert Morgenthau. He's 93 years old, a part of the greatest generation, a veteran of World War II. He was a United States attorney in New York who served 3 presidents, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and Richard Nixon. He knew civil rights icons, even has a letter from Eleanor Roosevelt on his wall. And he served as New York City's district attorney for nearly 40 years.
It'll be about 3.5 million cases over the length of my term.
He knows a thing or two about confirming convictions.
More than 100,000 people to jail or prison.
Morgenthau's grandmother is actually from Montgomery. That's his connection to Alabama. As for the Keunzel case, his late son-in-law worked on it pro bono years ago. When he read the details for himself, Morgenthau felt an obligation to throw his reputation behind the case.
And I thought, here's an innocent man who's going to go to his death. We got to try to set the record straight.
At trial 25 years ago, the case hung on Harvey Venn's testimony, an admitted accomplice who took a plea deal to spend the next decade in prison. He was Keunzel's roommate and co-worker and had to face a drug charge in the coming days.
We had an eyewitness here, a guy who was with Keunzel. You can't get any, more overwhelming evidence of guilt than that.
Venn originally told police that he wasn't with Keunzel the night of the murder, but at trial he told the jury that Keunzel walked into the store and shot Linda Offord. Keunzel maintained he was at home sleeping. The other key witness, a 16-year-old named April Harris, who was driving by around the time of the murder, placed both men inside the store. The state used her testimony as evidence to corroborate Venn's account that Keunzel was the killer. The DA Rumsey also needed Harris because of the lack of physical evidence linking Keunzel to the crime. No physical evidence connected Keunzel to the murder. But April Harris told 2 different stories. She told a grand jury that she couldn't positively identify anyone in the store. She told the jury that she definitely saw Venn and Keunzel. We reached out to Robert Rumsey on several occasions, but he never responded to our interview requests. Clay Crenshaw is an assistant attorney general who handles all death penalty cases for the state in the post-conviction stage. He says Harris's testimony is solid despite her differing accounts.
Even in her grand jury testimony, she said in her best judgment it was Keunzel and Venn in the store, and this was at a time about an hour before the murder happened.
Morgenthau argues that the record shows otherwise, that 8 other witnesses and Venn never placed Keunzel there.
Not a single one. And the accomplice himself said that he was in the store with another man when he was first interviewed. He never mentioned Keunzel.
And specifically regarding Harris's testimony, he argues her inconsistency was kept a secret for decades.
She said, quote, she couldn't really see a face. That was a quote. But that grand jury testimony was suppressed. So Keunzel's lawyer never saw that for 22 years.
Crystal Floyd was Harvey Venn's girlfriend back in 1988. She's telling her story for the first time. She was never called to testify, but she was interviewed by both police and the DA Rumsey on numerous occasions.
I was scared to death. I mean, I didn't want to go in there. I've never been through nothing like this, and I wanted my mom or my dad to go. He said no.
According to Floyd, when Venn visited her around the time of the murder, Keunzel wasn't with him.
It was around 10 o'clock. He was alone. And he asked me the same thing, how do you know he's alone? And I told him, that, street lights, I mean, you could see into his car, you couldn't, there was no one in there.
I'm standing on the spot in front of Crystal Floyd's childhood home, where she says she saw the car of Harvey Venn the night of the crime more than 25 years ago. And as a matter of fact, the street light that she says provided light into his car is still here.
We mentioned earlier that no physical evidence linked Keunzel to the crime. No fingerprints, no DNA. Harvey Venn's pants were stained with blood during the botched robbery that yielded no cash. Since Keunzel's trial, Venn's bloody pants and the alleged murder weapon, a 16-gauge shotgun, have gone missing. Clay Crenshaw with the Alabama Attorney General's office said that was news to him.
I mean, I'm not aware of that. I mean, certainly, while a case is ongoing, you would hope that the court exhibits would be retained.
Missing evidence notwithstanding, Crenshaw says it's his belief that Keunzel is definitely guilty. He points to Keunzel's behavior after his trial, changing his story in several ways, even having family members attempt to bribe his cellmate into concocting a new story.
Keunzel is just not innocent, because certainly if he was, then he would tell a consistent, plausible story of innocence, and he hasn't done that. He is a murderer, and he's a really bad liar, too.
Crenshaw maintains that the state doesn't see anything significant in the new evidence, like the suppressed grand jury testimony or Crystal Floyd's story. The state doesn't find her credible because her version of events wasn't consistent.
Now, some of it could have been used to impeach some witnesses, but it wouldn't have had any overall effect on the guilt or innocence of Keunzel.
Morgenthau says his nearly half-century as a criminal prosecutor tells him to look at the facts of the case, and in his view, the old and new evidence could lead to a life-changing result.
I've learned you can never predict what a jury's going to do, and I'm not going to try to do it here, but I would say the weight of the evidence, the overwhelming weight of the evidence, is strongly in favor of an acquittal.
Keunzel and his attorneys are basically at the end of their rope legally. There's a deadline set for about a month from now regarding whether that grand jury testimony changed the jurisdiction of the case. A lot of Keunzel's legal woes actually go back to a missed filing deadline by his attorney 20 years ago. The state will argue to dismiss these claims, but the state, of course, has a big case here. It's been 20 years. And if he doesn't get this one, he'll likely just argue for clemency, and there's anybody's guess that that'll happen.
Well, no one wants an innocent man to be put to death, but of course there are still a lot of questions that are still unanswered. And Max, this is a very interesting case that you have helped bring to light, and we have much more information for you about this case on WSFA.com, including some of Keunzel's post-trial stories, as well as more from Robert Morgenthau, and we'll let you decide for yourself what you think of the innocence or guilt involved.